Hello, and welcome to my weapon build series on the Kuva weapons in Warframe. In this series, I will be going over all of the weapons that can be obtained through the Kuva Lich system. For the first installment in this video series, we will be looking at possibly the most powerful secondary in the game at the time of recording in terms of sheer damage output, the Kuva Nukor. During this video, I will be going over how the weapon works, what innate elemental damage type I would suggest for it, and how to go about creating a build for this gun. To start with, let's take a brief look at the stats. The base version of the Kuva Nukor comes with an accuracy of 100, standard for beam weapons, a critical chance of 7.0, this is incredibly low, but just high enough that it is worth building some crits onto this weapon, a critical multiplier of 5.0, which is one of the highest in the game, and is incredibly good. A fire rate of 10. That's 10 damage ticks per second. Not necessarily 10 ammo per second, because the Kuva only uses half an ammo per damage tick. Magazine of 77, meaning you have a very good magazine economy with this weapon. Multi-shot of 1. Pretty standard. There are some interesting interactions with multi-shot and beam weapons that we will go over during our builds. Noise alarming means you've got to use an Exilis mod if you want to make it silent, so you can Ivara or Loki without his augment. Reload of 2.0. This is rather long. A status chance of 50%. This is one of the highest in the game, and is incredibly useful to the point at which you do not need to use 60% dual stat mods if you are not going for something like a Condition Overload Primer. However, if you are, you can hit 170% status chance with just the 4 dual stat mods, which is pretty good. That's a guaranteed status proc per hit with a chance for a second one per damage tick. Trigger is held, and the base damage of the Kuva Nukor is 21 radiation damage. This is low. And it cannot be increased with impact, puncture, or slash mods, making them entirely useless on this weapon. Now, let's go over what I would recommend getting as your innate damage type. There are a few options for the Kuva Nukor, and I will show them on screen now. You can go for either impact, heat, cold, electricity, toxin, magnetic, or radiation. Do note, the Kuva Nukor has innate radiation already, making that choice less optimal, leaving us mostly with magnetic, toxin, electricity, cold, heat, or impact. Let's go from top to bottom and start eliminating ones that I would not recommend. Impact. This is generally a bad status. It staggers enemies, it's not great against really any enemy type, and it's not particularly a useful status unless you want to abuse Parazon finishers, which, with this weapon, you just really going to be able to kill them before that happens, so I don't recommend it. Heat. This is a pretty damn good one. It is a damage over time status. It has scaling damage, meaning the more heat procs or heat status procs you have on a target, the more damage it will do. It strips up to 50% of the enemy's armor, reducing their damage resistance from armor. And it has some crowd control, because it causes them to flail around while they're on fire, if they're not a Moa or a few other targets. Cold. It can be used to build viral, and it slows enemies down. That's about it. It's not particularly useful, and I would not recommend it. Electricity. Again, not a bad option. If you want to go for it, it can be used to make corrosive. It is a little bit of crowd control, because it will stun enemies that are affected by it, and it's a damage over time effect. Not a bad choice. Toxin. This is, again, a damage over time effect. Is extremely good against Corpus, since Toxin procs bypass shields. It can be built into gas, or corrosive, or viral, all of which, well, not gas, are fairly okay status types, Viral currently being the king, and it is a damage over time effect, but I would not suggest it over the choice of Heat or Electricity. Magnetic. This is the only elemental combo I would recommend getting innate for the Kuva Nukor, and only in one situation, maybe two situations. You want to use the Kuva Nukor during the Prophet Taker fight, or you want to prime Condition Overload to a ridiculous degree. Because if you have innate Magnetic, you can build the Kuva Nukor to do Radiation, Magnetic, Corrosive, and Blast, all at the same time. That is 4 unique status types, and is, pretty damn good, especially with the Kuva Nukor's 50 status chance. Now we're going to go over what I chose, because I, personally, picked up a Heat Kuva Nukor. The reason I picked Heat is because in the current status meta, Viral is utterly broken, and I want to save a mod slot by not having to build Viral and Heat, which would happen if I had chosen Toxin. The reason I didn't go Electricity, which can be used in much the same way to save you a mod slot, is because Heat also has some armor stripping that Electricity would lack if you decided to build Viral, because you don't have Corrosive. And then the reason I didn't choose Toxin, because that does build into Viral, is that would require me to use all 3 elemental mods. I would need to use a Toxin, I would need to use a Cold, and I would need to use a Heat to avoid making Gas or Blast and Toxin on the weapon, neither of which is particularly good. So with that out of the way, let's start looking at how I would recommend building this weapon. Start with some basic requirements. You're going to put on Hornet Strike. That damage is important. Then we're going to do our multi-shot with Barrel Diffusion and Lethal Torrent. This will also add some fire rate. The way multi-shot works with beam weapons is you don't get an extra beam. Instead, you just get a damage multiplier after the mods have been in place. So, we take our modded total damage, and it just gets multiplied. Like, in this case, 2.8. Then, noting our 5x critical multiplier, you're going to want to build some crit. You have some options here. We have Pistol Gambit. Problem is, it brings us up to 15.4. Not great. We have Hydraulic Crosshairs, which is bring us up closer to 17 or 18 when it's procced. I mean, it won't show here. It's not a bad idea. But if you're going to build crits, I would recommend getting your hands on Primed Pistol Gambit. 20% with the damage tick rate of this weapon is usable. But for the sake of demonstration, we're going to start with Pistol Gambit. Easy mod to get, basic. 5x critical multiplier. You might be tempted to leave off Target Cracker. Do not do this. Put Target Cracker in the gun. That brings you up to an 8x critical multiplier. If you have primed Target Cracker, throw that in. Just use it. 10x is obscene, absurd, and puts a smile on my face every time. Next, we're going to build an element. Since we chose a Heat Progenitor, we have a damage over time effect, meaning Viral is ridiculous on this gun. Also, the way Heat stacks, we do want a little bit of status chance. So we're going to throw on some Viral. In my personal opinion, I'm going to use Deep Freeze for some extra damage, and Pistol Pestilence to put us to 80% status. I could use Frostbite, but I'm going to lose a little bit of status, or a little bit of damage, and I'm going to go way over 100% status, which is not bad, especially if you want to use this as a hybrid Condition Overload primer and damage dealer. I'm going to leave this on Deep Freeze now, because personally 80% status is more than enough. We've got 2 slots left. We have a Exilus slot, which in the Exilus mod slots, you've got a few options. Steady hands, completely useless. This thing has no recoil. You have suppress. Good if you're running a stealth frame and you want to be silent. Targeting subsystem, also useless. Reflex draw, sure, if you're condition overload priming, might be okay. Hawkeye, zoom sucks. Air recon, if you're being mobile, I can see a point for it. Spry sprite sights, yeah, especially if you want to run instead of pistol gambit, if you want to use hydraulic crosshairs, it can be good because you're going to be aiming the entire time. But what I would recommend using in the most case, especially considering the 2.0 reload, is eject magazine. The reason I would recommend using this is because anytime you switch off of the weapon, use your melee, use your primary, to use an exalted or pseudo-exalted Warframe ability, eject magazine is going to start reloading at 20% of your magazine per second. Meaning, shoot the gun until it's drained, switch off to your melee or your primary, and come back a couple of seconds later to a fully reloaded gun, never stopping your damage output. The other option is pistol ammo mutation. This gun, despite having a lot of ammunition reserve, it's got 210 ammunition in reserve and a fairly large magazine, will eat ammo for breakfast, making ammo mutation not a bad option. You could also just run carrier. Then, have our option slot. There are a couple of things that can go in here. For most people, I would recommend slapping on anemic agility. That's 90% fire rate at the cost of only 15% of your base damage. Now remember, your base damage on this weapon is really low. That's 15% of 21 damage that you're a little bit more depending on the elemental roll you get. Easy way to think about this is just think about it as minus 15 from your Hornet Strike. You're going to be 205% damage instead of 220. And this shoves your fire rate up to a really fast 25 ticks per second. Pretty good. The other option we could do, if we look at our damage spread, we notice that Viral is above and beyond the most proc status. This is a little bit not great, because Viral has a status cap of 10 procs. After 10 procs, it's giving you no benefit. Radiation, again, this is our second, and it's also got a cap of 10 procs. It gives you no benefit after that. Heat is the only status on this weapon that we can proc an unlimited number of times and still get benefit out of. So you might be tempted to throw on Heated Charge, which pushes it to the second most proc status, and puts our total damage to almost 1,000, which combined with an 8.0x critical multiplier, pretty good. So we're going to take this, and we're going to test it out really quick. I've got these enemies ready already, some heavy gunners, and some bombards. A couple things to note about this weapon is it is a chain weapon. So as I shoot one of these guys, it will chain to 4 others, giving them status and doing damage. As you can see, we are critting sometimes. It's just not consistent, and those heat procs are going to work. Pretty good. Have another option that I spoke about earlier, which is the fire rate, which will just make this stuff go faster, which, for most people, kill stuff faster is definitely a better option. Let's get over here and go kill stuff faster. As you can see, in return for killing stuff faster, we are burning through a lot more. I'm not going to kill them all in one magazine. Nor did we proc as many heat procs on the ones that were alive after our first magazine, because heat was number 3 in the proc priority. So for a viral build, I would recommend going either Heated Charge, a primed Heated Charge, if you have it, better, because it puts it at number 1 in the proc priority, or a primed faction mod. The reasoning behind the primed faction mod is that it is a after everything has happened damage bonus also on the faction it is after. In our case, we're using Expel Corrupted. This situation, our viral is amplifying our heat procs already. On top of that, we are going to be double dipping into those same heat procs with our Expel Corrupted mod. Meaning this is going to do a significant amount of damage on the heat procs. Quite a bit more significant than it was earlier. And we're still going to be able to kill them all in one magazine. Quite a bit more ammo left than even when we were using the heat mod there. Yeah, that's pretty good. Now, in other metas, I'm going to remove the Prime Expel mod, you might have been willing to build Corrosive here. Not a bad idea. And again, in this case, I would actually end up using both the Pistol Pestilence and Jolt. Jolt is a hard mod to get. If you don't have that, just use Convulsion. This means you're going to be applying a crap ton of statuses. Not even going to be funny. Again, here, Primed Expel mod, or the Heated Charge mod, or the Primed Heated Charge mod are going to be your better options, simply because they are going to make your heat procs do a lot of damage, as shown in that last one. Although, you're not getting the viral damage multiplier that you were now, because we only have Corrosive. But we are going to burn through their armor much, much faster. And he's going to tick down to his heat procs. Yeah. Pretty good. And definitely a contender for your builds, depending on who you're fighting. But in most circumstances, the viral build is going to be better. That out of the way. Why do I not recommend building this with Target Cracker and Pistol Gam? Simply because their primed versions exist. That is very much worth it. You're going to go load up the same enemies, and you're going to see just how fast this thing will chew through level 121 raids. Especially when it can crit like crazy. Yeah. That's damage on par to when we were using the Expel mod without those primed. Actually, we were using the Expel mod there. If we throw in Heated Charge, however, this is going to go faster. This is going to go a lot faster. It's going to get a lot of yeah. Look at those heat procs. That was sweet. That is some damage. And from a secondary, too. There's a lot of damage for a secondary to be doing. Now, I did allude to using this to prime Condition Overload. That is simply because this thing can stack up a lot of status chance. And I do mean a lot of status. We're gonna go summon those same mobs, and yeah. I'm using all the 60/60s just to stack up as much status as I can on these enemies as fast as possible. So, fully stacked. We have 10 of these on everything that was hit by the chain. So we down this. Now the entire section is crushed by these. If I was going to come through with Condition Overload melee and just whack them a few times, not only are they now all dead, but my Kuva Nukor is fully reloaded because I have eject magazine in there. That is the way I would recommend using this weapon if you don't have the primed critical mods. 2, this or this is a really good build, and is certainly worth the endo, the time, and possibly the plat if you're going to buy these from players to make. Thank you for watching. I've been Zip. Have a good day.